If you've been watching my channel for a while, then you know that I can't get enough of making random lists about football. We've highlighted English players playing abroad, researched the most random football contract clauses, and ranked Liverpool signings between 2005 and 2015. But have you ever stopped and wondered what football list topic could create the most divisive and not universally accepted opinions of all time? You can ask your grandmother who watched football in the 60s when she was in a dating scene, but why would you do that? Fortunately, I've done the hard work for you and compiled a list of the top 50 worst Premier League signings, which hopefully won't be longer than an hour, and a month to edit. Anyway, you're welcome. In making this list, I want to show you, the viewers, the criteria behind these signings and how I put the list together. I researched the total appearances, goals, assists, in-game performances, duration and longevity, perception and price tags of these players at the time. They put their name above the dotted line to determine the 50 worst Premier League signings of all time. Not to mention any off-field incidents which may have derailed the signing spectacularly. A signing must have been officially presented by the club to ensure entries are fairly included, not skewed by one particularly grumpy critic thinking outside the box. Whenever opinions differ between people, signings that were still particularly bad can qualify as worst Premier League signings. In this case, I simply feel there were worse ones. So it's not that you're wrong, it's just that I'm the one making the video. It's worth noting that this list represents my opinion at the time of writing. While it's easy to see who didn't perform well, I can't predict what future signings will garner obscenely bad reviews online. Also, as you may notice while going through this list, there aren't many signings from the early 90s. I want to assure you this hasn't been done carelessly, it's just that I wasn't old enough to watch these players playing bad. Though there are a few exceptions, they're more fitting for the honourable mention section. Now that all of that's out of the way, I'm the voice talking to you, and here is, in my opinion, the 50 worst Premier League signings ever. Number 50, Christian Poulsen to Liverpool in 2010. Let's start off with a signing more familiar to the channel. Signed from Juventus for about £4.5 million in 2010, he lasted one season and made 12 Premier League appearances, most of which were fortunately forgettable. When Kenny Dalglish took charge, he was surpassed in the pecking order by Jay Spearing. That should tell you the caliber of Poulsen's signing in this list. A former Juventus, Sevilla, Schalke and Copenhagen midfielder, as well as a Danish international, replaced in the starting 11 by a player who would later find his level at Bolton and Blackburn. No offence to Spearing, but offence to Poulsen. A horrible signing. Number 49, Moise Kean to Everton in 2019. 39 appearances and 4 goals later, and taking into consideration the add-ons in this transfer, which would rise to about 27 to 30 million pounds, each goal effectively cost roughly 7 to 8 million pounds. He was only 19 when he moved to a completely different country, and it was clearly too soon to make such a big jump. His last Everton appearance came in 2021 before returning to Juventus initially on loan, then permanently. He later rebuilt his form in Italy, where he moved to Fiorentina in 2024. Now 25, a return to England might work out better for him, but until then, he's here as one of the worst. Number 48, Seth Johnson to Leeds in 2001. Probably one of the earliest examples of a signing more renowned for symbolising a club's financial downfall. After making his first and only appearance for the Three Lions, Johnson joined Leeds in 2001 for around £7 million. In hindsight, it's one of the worst Premier League signings. Not purely because of performances, but because of the contract structure and financial recklessness surrounding it. He made 54 appearances in 4 years. There were also reported clauses that meant Leeds limited his appearances to avoid additional payments to Derby. He was reportedly earning around £37,000 per week, a huge wage at the time. Johnson retired at 28 due to recurring knee injuries. So really, this inclusion is less an indictment on Johnson himself and more on Peter Ridsdale's chaotic financial management during Leeds' attempt to cement themselves as Champions League regulars. Number 47, Tanguy Ndombele to Tottenham in 2019. At the time, Tottenham's record signing at £55 million, Ndombele was obviously a great talent if a team were to fork out that much money for a 23-year-old. Even manager Jose Mourinho said so, but continued by talking about how his input wasn't good enough after a 1-1 draw with Burnley. He decided to stay and had some positives for the 2020-21 season, having some standout performances. Nearing the end of his Tottenham days, he was left out of the squad by interim manager Ryan Mason, spent the next 2 years of his contract on loan to Napoli and Galatasaray, and then left on a free. The age of 28 at the time he left, still with some sell-on value to only leave for nothing. A terrible signing when it comes to buying and selling. Number 46, Roger Johnson to Wolves in 2011. Signed from relegated Birmingham for around £4 to £7 million, he was handed the captain's armband at the start of the 2011-12 season. Mick McCarthy was sacked, Terry Connor was brought in, Johnson was disciplined for arriving at training unfit, and there were reported dressing room issues, more so with goalkeeper Rain Hennessy. Wolves were relegated, the following season brought another relegation, meaning he was part of 3 consecutive relegation campaigns, including his final year at Birmingham. He left in 2015, and let's just say, Paul Merson summarised that period well.
And it's pace, pace, pace. I see a lad once at Birmingham called Johnson, Roger Johnson. He played for Birmingham. Brilliant. Played on the edge of his box. Balls come in, headed them out, jumping in front of balls, blocking. He went to Wolves. Wolves played him on the halfway line. And Shane Long ruined him. Ball kept on going over the top. He was retired in about 10 minutes.
He was at Bromley last season.
Well, Merce, what I will say, Merce.
Number 45, Guido Carrillo to Southampton in 2018. Even in the late 10s, a £19 million player should have some form of positive input and prove their price tag. Signed in the winter window of the 2017-18 season, Carrillo came to bolster the Southampton attacking positions until his contract expires in 2021, scoring 21 goals in 3 seasons for Monaco. It isn't groundbreaking, but it was enough to bring him to the top level of English football. So, how did he do on the South Coast? 10 games in all competitions, 0 goals, and spent the remaining 2 seasons of his contract at Leganés on loan. Though Leganés were relegated in his second season with the club, he decided to stay in Spain as he joined Elche for free. £19 million down the drain. At least Ndombele did something. Number 44, Timo Werner to Chelsea in 2020. After arriving in England with a well-established reputation of being an energetic finisher, he previously scored 95 goals in 159 competitive appearances for RB Leipzig. His £14.5 million release clause was activated by Chelsea, where he joined in time for the 2020-21 season. 3 goals in his first 9 league appearances showed Werner needed more time to adjust to the demand of football in England. 2 years later, he returned to RB Leipzig in a cut price of £25 million. 56 appearances, 10 goals. For a striker who was deployed more on the left rather than the centre of the attack, he also provided 13 assists, but his big misses during his time in London is more remembered than his attacking output. If his loan to Tottenham was the cherry on the cake has the words, "Not good in England," marked on it with icing. Number 43, Eli Mangala to Man City in 2014. Man City, like every club in the world, are still prone to signing some stinkers, and that could also include a signing who was seen as the next big thing. Signed from Porto for nearly £32 million, one of his first games for the Citizens included an own goal and conceding a penalty. Pellegrini came into the frame defending his new centre-back, calling for trust in the young defender. But obviously in hindsight, this wasn't the case as he would be shipped out on loan on numerous occasions, and would join Valencia on a free in 2019. The fact his France career began when he was one of the best players in Portugal, to receiving his last cap when City lost trust in him, shows how terrible of a transfer this really was, to the extent that this could really be Man City's worst ever signing. Number 42, Alberto Aquilani to Liverpool in 2009. The replacement for Xabi Alonso, Aquilani on paper was a good replacement for who was to be a well-established Galactico. Signed for £17 million from Roma, who was one of their best talents, Aquilani passed the medical at Anfield and took the number 4 shirt, previously worn by Champions League winner and ever-reliable Sami Hyypiä. In his 3 years at Liverpool, he only made 18 league appearances, scored 1 goal, and was marred by numerous injuries. Loans to Juventus and AC Milan during his contract didn't help with gaining match fitness back in England, as he would make a permanent move to Fiorentina in 2012. When he played, he fitted well with Liverpool, but injuries severely restricted him being able to apply his talents consistently in the Premier League. Akolani is fitting in this list, but one can only imagine how well he could have been alongside Gerrard if he didn't have injuries everywhere on his body. Number 41, Roberto Soldado to Tottenham in 2013. Scoring 80 goals in all competitions for Valencia in 3 years is a tally that stands out in world football. It was also valued at £26 million, which is what Tottenham spent to acquire his services. One of the 7 signings Tottenham made after selling Gareth Bale to Real Madrid, 2 years at White Hart Lane allowed Soldado to score 16 goals in all competitions. His goal-scoring antics in Spain obviously did not replicate in England, where he then moved back to La Liga with Villarreal for £10 million. He just couldn't adjust to football in the league, which is even more astounding as he scored as many in league as he did in European competitions. 10 down, 40 to go. And if you like this content and enjoy the sounds entering your ears, be sure to subscribe as we continue to grow the channel together. That being said, let's carry on. Number 40, Paul Konchesky to Liverpool in 2010. Before Liverpool, Paul Konchesky was a well-established Premier League left-back, playing for big teams in London with the likes of Charlton, West Ham and Fulham. He scored in the 2006 FA Cup final, played in the Europa League final, and proved that he could contribute a great deal to the England squad. In 2010, Konchesky joined Roy Hodgson to Anfield for £3.5 million. A cheap transfer, but one which ultimately proved that he was not able to handle the move. His move to Liverpool was so much of a disappointment that he moved to Nottingham Forest on loan in the same season, and left Liverpool for Championship side Leicester in 2011. If there was an image which speaks 1,000 words, Konchesky's mum's rant on Twitter summarises this entire transfer. So much so that this will not be the last time we talk about Paul on this channel. Number 39, Cenk Tosun to Everton in 2018. Another winter window signing, another exuberant valuation for a mid-striker, putting it lightly. Signed in the first few days of the 2018 winter transfer window for £27 million, Tosun scored for fun for Besiktas in the Turkish Super League and flew to England as an established international. Once his contract expired, 4 years later, he left with a record of 1 goal every little over 5 games, 2 loan spells, and returned to Besiktas for free. The weird thing is that he did a decent job in the first half season he was with Everton, scoring 5 goals in 14 games. 3 goals in 25 games in the next season was a sign that the investment was not going to work out for Tosun or Everton. It worked out well for Besiktas though, receiving a massive fee for him and bringing him back for peanuts, where he would score 15 goals in his first season back. No point at all. Number 38, Andre Onana to Manchester United in 2023. If you are a football fan, then as sure as day and night occurs every day, you have an opinion on Andre Onana. If you were to ask me about it, I would say that Andre Onana symbolises what is wrong with modern day goalkeeping. The fact the goalkeeper is told to prioritise his skills with the ball at his feet rather than his hands is a sure sign that modern goalkeeping is broken. Onana took to Old Trafford in 2023, replacing a goalkeeper who had won 2 Golden Glove awards, was voted Goalkeeper of the Year on 5 separate occasions, won the Sir Matt Busby Player of the Year 4 times, and was voted Manchester United's Player of the Year 4 times, and as well as more accolades highlighting his ability to make great saves. David De Gea leaves for free, Man United sign Onana for around £48 million, and the rest is history. Or at least a nightmare for United fans. Let's talk about some moments which put him on this list. The horrible save that goes under his body against Bayern Munich, the pass to Dries Mertens against Galatasaray, leading to a penalty and red card for Casemiro, falling to the ground and reaching into the air as Icardi lifts the ball over him, positioning himself the wrong way against Galatasaray with a free kick, parrying another free kick into his own goal, stumbling backwards as he concedes against Bayern Munich at Old Trafford, and they're just in the Champions League group stage at the time. In the league, he concedes a goal which is going straight down the middle against Nottingham Forest, can't outmuscle Wolves players when conceding from a corner, watches the ball fly across the 6-yard box for Mitoma to score point blank for Brighton, tries to grab a cross but instead gives it to Ruter to score in the same game, reenacts movement you'd find on the dance floor at Reading, when conceding against Everton, pats the ball to Maddison to score from Tottenham, and comes out too far when Dogu is wondering why his goalkeeper's at the edge of the box against Ipswich, when Onana should be trusting his defence, but instead lets Philogene score an open goal. I'm sure I've missed many in the league and Europa League, but the final straw, not only for then Man United boss Ruben Amorim, but Man United fans as a whole, was the FA Cup game against Grimsby earlier this season. If you haven't seen it yet, or if you enjoy watching the game so much because of his performance, go and watch it. In a year, maybe 2 years' time, Onana could be higher up this list. But since he's still contracted to Man United, if there's a chance he puts on a Man United jersey again, then that'll be a great sign that he will climb higher up this ranking with more merit. Number 37, Davy Klaassen to Everton in 2017. Not the most expensive transfer on his list thus far, but one just as wasteful and irresponsible in the footballing world as the rest. Signed for £23.6 million, Klaassen joined the Toffees as one of the best talents, representing Ajax. More so as their captain the previous season. Ronald Koeman, who will likely be named the coach of the Netherlands for the 14th time in as many years, was the manager at the time of his arrival. But Klaassen would find himself in a state of limbo when Allardyce and Marco Silva took to the Everton dugout, as he would hardly find any playing time with the first team. From September to March the following year, he did not play a single minute of football at Goodison Park, and would move on in the summer, joining Werder Bremen for £12 million. Though some money was recouped, this was clearly a signing when the board at Everton spent carelessly, and maybe couldn't get to grips with how football really worked. Number 36, Owen Hargreaves to Manchester in 2007 and 2011. That's right, we have an entry which is fitting for this list on two separate occasions. Born in Canada, played in Germany, and initially represented Wales at youth level, Owen Hargreaves was a somewhat hidden talent back in the early noughties, when at the time footballers playing abroad weren't as widely known, at least until David Beckham joined Real Madrid. Playing for Bayern Munich, he was an integral part of their team for 8 seasons. In 2007, he made the switch to England, joining Alex Ferguson's Red Devils for around £17 million. Being voted England's best player at the 2006 World Cup, Hargreaves would win the Champions League and Premier League in his first season. Yet Ferguson would later call him one of the most disappointing signings. Why? Recurring patella tendon problems restricted him to playing only 5 games in 3 years. Once his contract expired, he joined rivals Man City in 2011. One appearance later, he would join the Citizens Parade bus after their first top-flight title in 44 years, but didn't qualify for a medal. A complete waste of time for Manchester as a whole. Number 35, Gianelli Mbula to Stoke in 2016. Playing his way from Ligue 2 Guingamp to earning moves to Marseille and Porto, Stoke took the punt in 2016, just before the winter transfer window closed, for a club record fee of just over £18 million. At the time when Stoke were Premier League stalwarts in the 2010s, it did not start out well at all, being part of the team that conceded 3 first-half goals against Everton. However, later on in the season, he contributed with a couple of goals. The following season, his first full season, he actually played less than the half season just gone. The biggest contribution he made for the season was an own goal against Liverpool in December. 3 seasons straight out on loan later, he would leave for Sochi and would never revitalise his career after Stoke. His last season, before beginning his loan spells, saw Stoke relegated, and at the time of writing, they have not returned to the top flight. Mbula's signing was incredibly underwhelming, more so for a team where you can either make it in the game or break it, and it was unfortunately the latter. Number 34, Andriy Shevchenko to Chelsea in 2006. If this were a year before, Shevchenko would have joined Chelsea for a fee of €73 million, plus Hernan Crespo. Instead, he signed for £30.8 million. The 2004 Ballon d'Or winner, Champions League winning 30-year-old, was undoubtedly one of the best strikers at the time, and more so, one of the greatest of all time. He didn't need accolades to prove his worth. But in hindsight, there is a reason you don't fork out that amount of money on a 30-year-old. from 173 goals in 296 appearances for AC Milan to just 22 goals in 77 games for Chelsea. Shevchenko scored sporadically, and most of the time was inefficient when he wore the colour blue. Though I don't support Chelsea myself, Shevchenko was someone I'd hoped would fare well in England, considering he really was one of the best. But he wasn't. He was one of the worst. Maybe it's his signing that is printed in the coffee room at Chelsea today that is the primary reason Todd Boehly doesn't want to sign anyone who is near enough halfway to claiming their pension. If you never got to see Shevchenko play, watch him. He is one of the greatest strikers ever in my opinion, but his big price tag and his output on goals at his old age puts him in 34th. Number 33, Jadon Sancho to Manchester United in 2021. A player sought after for so long by United, bought for £73 million and played only 83 times in soon to be 5 years, with 12 goals to show for the Red Devils. Sancho is definitely one of the biggest flops. Why isn't he high on this list? He is still contracted to Manchester United. So if he returns from his loan from Aston Villa and continues to play for United, there's a chance he could prove to be even worse value for money for the club. Sancho set a precedent for young English talent playing abroad, that they can succeed without returning to England. Yet he chose to return, this time moving to United after playing for Dortmund, where he scored 50 goals in 137 appearances. Moving to Manchester United for a gargantuan fee, Sancho repaid his employers by having an altercation with the manager at the time, Erik ten Hag, and playing EA Sports 24 as his team were preparing for a game against Bayern Munich after being banished from training. Sancho's transfer is the clearest example of clubs paying for promise, rather than well-established talent and a professional who would be able to challenge for a position in the starting 11 of a team. Number 32, Calvin Phillips to Man City in 2022. There couldn't have been a clearer signing, which would fit Manchester City well than Phillips, who previously was an integral part of Bielsa ball at Leeds and an ever-present name in the England squad. It would instead turn out to be one of the most regrettable signings for player and club in modern history. Signed for £45 million, he joined the champions of England after playing 234 competitive league games in 8 years. 4 years later, he's only played 65 games. Injuries, numerous loans, and being unable to dislodge future Ballon d'Or winner Rodri, Phillips has gone on to essentially forget how to play football. The very least right now, going for him is the ability to lift his foot and apply a decent amount of force to cause a ball to roll in the opposite direction. What hasn't helped tenfold is his manager outing him in public over his weight, exclaiming how Phillips has returned to training overweight in December 2022. There is no excusing any player for their terrible transfers in this list. But to be honest, one of the greatest managers of all time hasn't helped with his input over the transfer. Number 31, Gaston Ramirez to Southampton in 2012. £12 million would prize Ramirez away from Bologna to the Premier League. 8 goals in 33 appearances the previous season rewarded him with such a move, and was it worth it? Nah. 8 goals in 55 games over 4 years was the output, in addition to loan spells to Championship sides Hull and Middlesbrough. His international career began to dry up as he found his level in the second tier of English football, but he would then return to Serie A with Sampdoria after a year with Middlesbrough. Why is Ramirez above the names already mentioned? He arrived in England to contribute in some way and hardly did. Southampton may have had a fairer time in the Premier League if Ramirez hadn't joined in the first place. He should have stayed in Italy for his sake. Number 30, Afonso Alves to Middlesbrough in 2008. Gareth Southgate's marquee signing when he managed the only football club of his career, Middlesbrough. And it was he who unveiled Afonso Alves to North Yorkshire. For around £12 million, Alves arrived with a fantastic goal-scoring record, joining from Dutch side Heerenveen after scoring 48 goals in 50 appearances. There really is something about Dutch football, where some players who arrive from the Eredivisie succeed in the Premier League, but it seems like even more fail, and that is the category Alves finds himself in. 49 appearances for Middlesbrough, 13 goals, and his last season for the club saw them relegated to the Championship. Alves would then move to Qatar, where he would finish his career. There seems to be two lessons from this inclusion. Number one, be cautious when you sign strikers from the Netherlands. And number two, Southgate may not be as good a coach as people make him out to be. Though he is a Sir now, so who am I to say? Number 29, Steve Marley to Fulham in 2001. Fulham's first and only inclusion, which was at the time their record transfer for £11.5 million. He would join Fulham as a France international with pedigree in Ligue 1 with Lyon, being given the blessing of then France coach Roger Lemaire to show Fulham what they're paying for. 4 years contracted at the London club, 2 of which were actually with Fulham while the other 2 were on loan to Marseille. That should tell you where this is going. Let alone being on this list, 54 appearances, 11 goals. That's bad enough to merit being mentioned as a bad signing, but the fact then chairman Mohamed Al Fayed took then manager Jean Tigana to court over the transfer. Everything was eventually dropped, but the fact that this transfer was so bad that the chairman of the club took the manager to court because of how expensive and bad it was is a great start to entering our 20s on the list. Number 28, Vincent Janssen to Tottenham in 2016. Roberto Soldado, as already mentioned, was signed by Tottenham for a high fee, with a contribution record not so much fitting for the faith put in him. Now with another striker on this list, how much worse could it have been for Tottenham signing strikers? Signed in 2016, Vincent Janssen joined Spurs for £17 million. A 22-year-old at the time of his signing, he, quote, ticked all the boxes, according to then manager Mauricio Pochettino. 3 years with the North London side, surely he would add something new to Spurs' attacking options for years to come. 42 games later in all competitions, 6 goals. On one of those years contracted to Tottenham, he was sent out on loan to Fenerbahce, which was at the time the home for washed-up footballers who tried to resurrect their careers. More so, after finding out the Premier League was a step too far for their ability. 3 years after claiming he ticked all the boxes, Pochettino exclaimed how Janssen was not in his plans anymore, not even being given a shirt number for the upcoming season. He would then be shipped off to Mexico for £6 million. And now at the age of 31, he would find his level with Royal Antwerp in Belgium, scoring roughly a goal every 3 games. Honestly, as useful as using a sieve for drinking water. Number 27, Kepa Arrizabalaga to Chelsea in 2018. From being the most expensive goalkeeper in football history to only playing in cup games for Arsenal, Kepa has gone from football euphoria, potentially being the next best thing, to someone who is still trying to resurrect his career at 31. Chelsea acquired the services of Athletic Bilbao's goalkeeping maestro Kepa for £71.6 million. He was seen as one of the most prominent examples of a new generation of goalkeepers who start the attack behind the defense and play more with their feet. Instead, like Onana, Kepa has symbolized how modern goalkeeping, in my opinion, is broken, considering there is only one Manuel Neuer in this universe. Kepa's Chelsea career had been marred with simple errors, poor positioning, and lacking an ability to consistently react fast enough to stop shots entering the goal. What is the most negatively prominent match during his time with Chelsea was the 2019 EFL Cup final. Refusing to be substituted for Willy Caballero, he saved only 1 penalty in the shootout, leading to Man City lifting the trophy, but had left a larger precedent for players feeling they're above the decision of the manager. Up until 2025, he would struggle to find consistent form, being shipped out on loan to both Real Madrid and Bournemouth. The latter of which he did a good job in helping Bournemouth finish in the top half of the table. Maybe it was a massive transfer fee, gargantuan responsibility being placed on his young shoulders, and his own hubris that would make him go down as, financially, one of the worst signings to grace the Premier League for years to come. Number 26, Milan Jovanovic to Liverpool in 2010. Now I'm going to show you a picture of this man when he joined Liverpool, and I want you to guess how old he is. So I'm going to give you a few seconds. 29. The personification of Benjamin Button, this inclusion is more personal resentment to Liverpool's transfer dealings during the banter decade than anything else. But I want to make the argument that though he was a free transfer, he did more to damage Liverpool than help them, placing him here on this list. Signed from Standard Liège in 2010, he was initially signed by Rafa Benitez. But as Benitez left Anfield, Ivanovic stayed at Anfield, but when Hodgson took charge, he would go on to play 18 games in all competitions, scoring his first goal against League Two side Northampton, and would then rarely be called upon by Dalglish after Hodgson's inevitable sacking. A year on from when he signed for Liverpool, he would move on to his last club, Anderlecht. So here's why I think Ivanovic deserves to be on this list. He lacked decent midfield traits when he was on, lacking defensive discipline and positional awareness, had minimal impact in the Premier League, played 10 times with no goal contributions, and if it weren't for the move to Anderlecht the year after, Liverpool would have given him £10 million over the 3 years of his contract. And surprisingly, he has strong international pedigree with Serbia and was an elite goal scorer in Belgium. His high wages, no league contributions, falling out of favour in a matter of months, gone after one season with no resale value, is why I believe Ivanovic is one of the worst Premier League signings ever. Liverpool and free transfers do not work out well. Just look at Joe Cole. We've now reached the midway point of our video, a quick breather before we continue. But if you enjoy this kind of content, be sure to look at my other content. Right now, we're visiting every football ground in the universe. Hopefully we'll get another ground abroad in soon. Also be sure to check out my videos, such as Brendan Rodgers' time as Liverpool manager, and 5 English footballers you don't know who play their football abroad. With that out of the way, let's continue with our list. Number 25, Thomas Brolin to Leeds in 1995. A Sweden and Parma star, Leeds took the punt to bring him to England for £4.5 million, a record fee for the club at the time. Under manager Howard Wilkinson, he made his debut off the bench against Newcastle and continued to help Leeds go 6 games unbeaten, winning 4. 4 goals in 8 games, 2 of which were against West Ham. It was however against Liverpool that everything came crumbling down, as Brolin refused to play on the right of the midfield, not wanting to be involved in the defensive side of the game. Both manager and player clashed, which inevitably led to Brolin being played less often. This would lead to him being sent out on loan to both FC Zurich and Parma during the remainder of his contract. Injuries didn't help with the matter either, inserting a metal staple into his ankle in 1996. He evidently felt his time at Leeds was so much of a horror show that he would pay for his loan to Parma with his own money. Injuries and the like would plague the remainder of his glittering career, and if there was a moment in time that would have incurred it all, it would be that Liverpool game, where he protested against Kroot running up and down the right like an idiot. Karma, I guess. Number 24, Ricky Alvarez to Sunderland in 2015. An Argentinian international who was as useful for Sunderland as a towel for Donald Duck when he leaves the shower. Alvarez was initially on loan to Sunderland in the 2014-15 season. Under Dick Advocaat, Sunderland survived in the Premier League, finishing 16th. As such, Sunderland were obliged to sign Alvarez permanently for £10.5 million. A flare-up of his knee in March of that season left Sunderland's survival celebration to the side and would arguably have been a bigger celebration for Inter Milan for receiving a substantial sum from Sunderland. Alvarez would go on to not play in a Sunderland shirt ever again, and his obligated transfer to Sunderland would then be taken to the Court of Arbitration of Sport in 2017, linking to a known case of tendinopathy in Alvarez's left knee. The court ruled Sunderland were liable to pay Inter the fee. He would move on to Sampdoria for the second part of the 2015-16 season, never to play in England or for Argentina ever again. Number 23, Ryan Brewster to Sheffield United in 2020. This is still a deal that I have to rub my eyes over. After a good, successful loan move to Swansea under Steve Cooper in the Championship, Sheffield United decided to sign Rhian Brewster for £23.5 million. Just for those who know this deal is clear as day, a bit of a humorous part on this section, the deal had a £40 million buyout option, just in case, if Liverpool wanted him back. With Brewster's first competitive season in the Premier League, 27 league appearances, 31 in total, 0 goals, 0 assists. His first goal contribution to Sheffield United was in the following season in November. Like Sancho, Sheffield United bought into the price of promise of Brewster and had it shoved back in their face. Collectively, Brewster played 119 times for Sheffield United in 5 years, scoring 9 and assisting 4 times. Derby on the free for this season, he has already scored 5 goals and assisted once. Still only 25, Brewster needs to find his level and stay in it. Otherwise, he will be stuck in Premier League and Championship purgatory and see out the remainder of his career as surplus. Number 22, Francis Jeffers to Arsenal in 2001. For all of you football fans in your 30s, still wanting to wear your nostalgia glasses, this inclusion is for you. Before the turn of the millennium, a young English striker by the name of Francis Jeffers burst onto the scene at the young age of 16 as he made his debut against Man United at Old Trafford in 1997. For 4 years, where he appeared for the Toffees, he performed well. An occasional injury here and there never allowed him to reach above 22 games in the league, but he would be able to contribute well for goals, scoring 6 each season. To some degree, there are a few notable similarities with the young Wayne Rooney when he started off with Everton. Only with Rooney moving to Old Trafford for £30 million, Jeffers was rewarded with a move to Arsene Wenger's Arsenal in a deal worth around £8 to £10 million. Competing against the likes of Thierry Henry and Sylvain Wiltord, you can guess how well his time at Highbury was. Marred with injuries, Jeffers only made 10 appearances in all competitions, scoring 2 goals. The next season, 6 goals in 28 games. A few loans here and there, but he would never reach the heights he was once bestowed with the Fox in the Box name tag. He would only manage to reach over 50 appearances for one club in his career, and would never score more than 7 goals in a season. Bear in mind, he has an England cap against Australia, and scored in. Looks like David Nugent has a buddy after all. Number 21, Kleberson to Man United in 2003. A solid signing if you play Football Manager in the turn of the millennium. A waste of talent in the real world. Signed alongside his soon-to-be Portuguese teammate Cristiano Ronaldo in 2003, Kleberson was signed to replace Juan Sebastian Veron, who had signed for top 4 rivals Chelsea. One of these signings for Man United would break records around the world, winning numerous Ballon d'Ors, and is recognised as the top international goal scorer of all time. The other, however, and obviously the one taking the 21st spot on our list, would win the Turkish Cup, Turkish Super Cup, and Brazilian Serie A after leaving Man United in 2005. Having just won the FIFA World Cup with Brazil in 2002, Kleberson arrived in England with top-level pedigree and expectation. Kleberson didn't speak a word of English, and started the season with some disappointing performances, more so against Wolves, and dislocated his shoulder in a 1-0 loss to Southampton. It was this game in particular that may be seen as the start of another star rising to the top, where Cristiano Ronaldo came off the bench to replace the injured Kleberson. 30 appearances in 2 years later, Kleberson would make a move to Besiktas. Some sources exclaim how it was Ronaldinho who convinced him to join United. But in all, the decisions Kleberson made throughout his career will likely leave him to wonder why he would make the decisions he made in the first place. So much promise, to then leave with both obscurity and wonder. Number 20, Serhii Rebrov to Tottenham in 2000. Dynamo Kiev's second top goal scorer of all time, Ukrainian football's joint top goal scorer ever, and the current Ukraine coach, Rebrov arrived in England with Champions League pedigree and goal-scoring fever to set the rest of Europe alight. It was then, in 2000, that Tottenham bought Rebrov for £11 million. they acquired the services of a striker who partnered a young Andriy Shevchenko and outscored him. Everything that made Rebrov a striker any team would take in a heartbeat: clinical, great in the air, and someone who scores goals that would take the club like Tottenham to the next level, was not to be the case. 2 seasons with Spurs, where in the first season he scored 9 Premier League goals in 29 games, and a second season where he scored 1 goal in 30 games, proved that even 26 years ago from today, big money moves can still go wrong. Once his contract expired in 2004, he would move to rivals West Ham, where he'd match his output in the attack, with 1 goal in 27 games. Rebrov is one of the earliest examples in the Premier League that just because a player is on paper out of this world, doesn't mean it would be all sunshine and daffodils in the Premier League. Number 19, Jack Rodwell to Sunderland in 2014. If there was a clear example of someone who appeared to fall out of love with the sport and focus more on money, it is Jack Rodwell. Once tipped to be a future England star for years to come, Rodwell came through the Everton Youth Academy, making his debut at the age of 16 and becoming the youngest player to represent Everton in European competition. After making a big step by moving to Man City in 2012 for £12 million, it seemed as if the only way was up for Rodwell. Though he struggled for game time at the Etihad, Sunderland took the punt to reveal him as their new player in 2014 for £10 million. In summary, it took Rodwell 1,370 days to be on the winning end of a result for Sunderland, playing 39 times until then. Not only that, but if you had the chance to watch Sunderland Till I Die on Netflix, then you would know that Rodwell had not only rejected numerous offers from other clubs due to inferior wages, but also turned down Sunderland's request to move on to less financially damaging terms for the club after relegation. By the time Sunderland were relegated to League One, Rodwell was reportedly on £70,000 a week. It was then in June 2018 that Sunderland's financial burden had his contract run out, ending years of paying a player who not only won so few games for the club, but hardly played once they were relegated in the first place. It is one of the many reasons in the footballing world that clubs should have more know-how when negotiating contracts in the event of relegation or similar situations. Though Rodwell is not particularly in a lot of fans' good books for how he handled the situation, this inclusion can also be argued as being self-inflicted by Sunderland themselves. Number 18, Danny Drinkwater to Chelsea in 2017. A Premier League winner, England international, and king of loans, Danny Drinkwater came through the Manchester United Youth Academy before finding a home at Leicester in 2012. In the 5 years he was with the Foxes, he played 218 times in all competitions and was an ever-reliable figure in their world-shaking Premier League win in 2016. It was then a year later that Chelsea presented him with his own shirt for £35 million. Once he signed, he soon found himself frozen out of the first-team picture at Stamford Bridge. From 2017 to 2022, he made 23 Chelsea appearances in all competitions, going out on loan to Burnley, Aston Villa, Kasımpaşa, and Reading during that time. Essentially, he was a squad player under Antonio Conte, but found little to no playing time under Maurizio Sarri. This would ultimately lead him to stepping away from professional football at the age of 33. And as recently as 2024, he has been working as a property developer. This isn't to say he would have set the world alight, but this is definitely a case of what could have been had he not joined Chelsea in the first place. Number 17, Andy Carroll to Liverpool in 2011. A footballer built for long ball tactics who thrived in a team that fed him opportunity after opportunity. Andy Carroll on his day was near unstoppable. That is why in 2011, Liverpool sought to buy him from Newcastle for £35 million. Alongside Luis Suarez in the January transfer window, Carroll was meant to be a major success. Having just fired Newcastle back into the Premier League, he was expected to be a tall, physical forward who was not only strong in the air, but also capable with his feet. Replacing the departing Fernando Torres, Carroll took the number 9 shirt and went on to make 58 appearances in all competitions over 2 seasons, scoring 11 goals. After a loan spell, he left for West Ham permanently in 2013 for less than half of what Liverpool paid. He may have scored an important goal against Everton in the FA Cup semi-final and won the 2012 League Cup, beating Cardiff. But to put this transfer into context, Man City bought Sergio Aguero for a similar fee, and he went on to score 260 goals in 390 competitive games over 10 years. It's night and day. Number 16, Per Kroldrup to Everton in 2005. Once upon a time, Everton qualified for the Champions League. You heard that right. Finishing 4th in the Premier League ahead of rivals Liverpool, who won the Champions League that same season, Everton looked to bolster their ranks as they prepared to compete amongst the best in Europe. For £5 million, David Moyes opted to purchase Danish international and Serie A defender Per Kroldrup. In his previous season with Udinese, he helped them finish 4th in Serie A and qualify for the Champions League. During the 2005-06 season, he would play for Everton for just half a season, making a solitary appearance. Making his debut against Aston Villa on 26th of December and moving permanently to Fiorentina in January 2006, Kroldrup is definitely one of the worst Premier League signings of all time. According to teammate Leon Osman, there were training sessions where Kroldrup would practice heading the ball like a 7-year-old. Kroldrup is probably one of the best examples of a footballer who, physically and mentally, was not adapted to the Premier League. Number 15, Alexis Sanchez to Manchester United in 2018. Before moving to Old Trafford, Alexis Sanchez was a force to be reckoned with, and in my opinion, one of Arsene Wenger's greatest signings. Playing across the front line as a supporting striker, winger or false nine helped him score 80 goals in 166 competitive games, with his best season coming in the 2016-17 season. That was until his move to Manchester United in the 2018 transfer window, where in a swap deal involving Enric Mkhitaryan, Sanchez joined Jose Mourinho's side. Signing until 2022, he was set to earn around £14 million a year, making him the Premier League's highest paid player at the time. The Telegraph also reported he received a £20 million signing on fee, with a further £10 million paid to his agent, taking the total cost of the deal to around £93 million. What was meant to be a 29-year-old creating new memories in Manchester United turned into a dramatic decline. In 45 appearances, he scored just 5 goals before moving on loan to Inter Milan in 2019, and later joining them permanently on a free transfer. For a footballer who once carried one of the best teams in England, the sudden loss of confidence and energy that warranted such a move meant he never truly recovered, later attempting to rediscover form in Italy, France and Spain. And it's not as if Mkhitaryan's move to Arsenal fared much better. It is one of the worst swap deals you can imagine. Number 14, Winston Bogarde to Chelsea in 2000. Widely considered as one of the biggest flops in Premier League history, Winston Bogarde only made 12 appearances for Chelsea in 4 years. We've now made ourselves a little fan group on this list of players who stick around clubs for the money, putting their whole footballing career in the trash heap. Signed by the late Gianluca Vialli, Bogarde soon found himself surplus to requirements once Vialli was replaced by Claudio Ranieri. It happens, a player joins a club to play, the manager gets sacked, and is replaced with a new one who doesn't see said player in their plans. The player is a professional, and in this case, Bogarde had experience playing for big clubs like Ajax and AC Milan, and was a Netherlands international. He could have found a new club. The only problem was that Winston Bogarde had a strong liking to his contract, where he was earning 40 grand a week, roughly 75 to 80,000 pounds in today's money adjusted for inflation. Bogarde honoured his contract by attending training while watching his own valuation drop due to the lack of first-team opportunities. 9 league appearances, 2 League Cup appearances, and 1 UEFA Cup appearance later, once his contract expired in 2004, he immediately retired from professional football. He reportedly earned around £10 million during his time at Chelsea. In hindsight, it is easy to make him out to be a mercenary, where he was honouring a contract agreed by both parties. It may not have affected Chelsea as badly as Jack Rodwell did with Sunderland, but it still goes down as one of the worst Premier League signings ever. And I'm sure even to this day, Winston Bogarde could care less. Number 13, Marco Boogers to West Ham in 1995. The man comically known as the Madman in a Caravan, Marco Boogers was signed by Harry Redknapp's West Ham for nearly £1 million, reportedly based largely on video footage. It was put forward that they should sign this Dutch forward, and his numbers would make you feel convinced, recently scoring 11 goals in 25 games for Sparta Rotterdam. Arsenal had just made one of the best signings in Premier League history with Dennis Bergkamp, so West Ham wanted to do the same and find some Dutch courage, so to speak. He joined West Ham, made 4 substitute appearances, and 7 months later was sent out on loan to Groningen. In only his second appearance for the Hammers against Manchester United, he was sent off for a dangerous challenge on Gary Neville, which looked like something from Total Wipeout. Boogers certainly made an impression in the Premier League, but not for the good reasons, as there were accusations he had been specifically hired to injure a United player. A 4-game suspension was the consequence, and he would only play 2 more games upon his return. By February, he was gone and would not return to England. On the field, this was one of the worst Premier League signings ever. But like a couple of inclusions on this list where other people had not helped their case, the English press were also culprits in Boogers' situation. More specifically, The Sun, printing on their back pages the words "Barmy Boogers living in a caravan," leaving people questioning his mental state. Not to mention Harry Redknapp leaving him out to dry in press conferences, hoping to sell Boogers back to the Netherlands. A worthy inclusion on this list, but that doesn't take anything away from the fact that there was clear character assassination that ultimately questioned both player and club's handling of each other. Number 12, Jean-Kevin Augustin to Leeds in 2020. It is at this point in our list that it becomes more difficult to put a player in their right position, and it all comes down to opinion. That being said, Augustin's transfer to Leeds fits right in the teens. Joining on loan when Leeds were in the Championship after a 16-year wait to return to the top flight of English football, Marcelo Bielsa became one of the most integral figures in Leeds' recent history. Though promotion brings bonuses and commercial revenue, they still recorded a loss of around £62 to £64 million, influenced in part by the Augustin situation. During his loan spell, he played just 48 minutes, and it was not his playing time that would activate the obligation clause at the time. It was because Leeds were promoted, they were obligated to pay RB Leipzig. The complications of this obligation was raised to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Leeds argued that the delayed season nullified the obligation, as promotion was confirmed after the loan technically expired. However, Leeds were ultimately ordered to pay Leipzig around £18 million. In addition to this, Augustin later pursued legal action regarding unpaid wages and contractual matters. The overall financial impact of the deal, including potential salary commitments and fees, significantly inflated the total cost of the transfer. When broken down to minutes played, it equated to an extraordinary cost per minute. Clearly, one of the worst signings to ever grace the Premier League, and one that could merit being in the top 5. However, in my opinion, as disastrous as this signing was, it stemmed more from contractual mismanagement by Leeds than from the player himself. Looking back now, this did not do as much direct sporting damage as Seth Johnson's transfer over 20 years ago. That being said, it does not take anything away from the fact that Augustin represents one of the worst transfers. Number 11, Juan Sebastian Veron to Manchester United and Chelsea in 2001 and 2003. Like Owen Hargreaves, we have another inclusion, where 2 moves in the Premier League were equally disappointing. In Veron's case, his Chelsea tenure was more overwhelming in terms of appearances, but that does not take away from how difficult his time at Old Trafford was. First signed by Alex Ferguson in 2001 for a fee of £28.1 million, Veron arrived as a well-established Argentinian international with multiple successes in Italy, winning silverware with Parma and Lazio. This made him the most expensive transfer in English football at the time. Veron started well, scoring in 3 of United's first 4 matches and winning Premier League Player of the Month. However, performances declined as the pace and physical demands of the Premier League appeared to affect him. Across 2 seasons, he showed flashes of quality but also struggled with injuries and consistency. For such a large fee at the time, the impact did not fulfill match expectations. He was then allowed to speak to Chelsea over a £15 million move and was convinced by Claudio Ranieri to move to London. Again, he started brightly, but across a 4-year contract with Chelsea, he only made 7 league appearances, spending 2 seasons on loan at Inter Milan and Estudiantes. Accumulating significant transfer fees across his career, a fantastic player with obvious quality to compete among the best in the world, but he will always be remembered as a player who struggled to fully adapt to the demands of English football. We finally made it to our top 10, essentially the most important part of the list. So at this point, I think it's important to talk about something always related to this kind of content: opinions. I've changed my own list so many times while writing this, adding names, taking out names, moving players higher or lower. That's what opinions do. Views change and people change. A couple of names were in my top 10 who are now in my honourable mentions, but with this being my own list, it's a matter of opinion. Some of you may agree, some of you may not, and that's okay. We all have opinions. It's what makes us unique. So really what I'm getting at is that with a list like this, there isn't much room to say it's objectively wrong. They're all bad signings. And if you have a different opinion, again, that's okay. Just don't hurt me. So let's crack through the top 10 and then I'll give you my honourable mentions. Names who would definitely be fitting to be on this list, but for whatever reason, just missed out for me. Number 10, Mario Balotelli to Liverpool in 2014. Inter Milan, Manchester City, AC Milan, Liverpool, Nice, Marseille. These are some of the big name teams Balotelli has played for throughout his career, and to some degree, he has had some success with. For Inter, he won numerous accolades, such as 3 Serie A titles, a Coppa Italia, and even the 2010 Champions League. With Man City, he won the FA Cup and the Premier League a year later, assisting Sergio Aguero, who would score the defining goal of the 2011-12 season, a Golden Boy winner in 2010, and a UEFA Euros runner-up in 2012. Balotelli was pure talent in his younger years, but like a firework in the living room, Balotelli was spectacular when he worked, but you always knew something unnecessary was about to explode. We can talk about Jose Mourinho, describing Balotelli as unmanageable, or when he drove to a women's prison in Italy to have a look, or even when he set part of his house on fire when fireworks were set off in it. But that's not what Balotelli is on this list for. It's his time with Liverpool. Signed by Brendan Rodgers to replace the outgoing Luis Suarez, Balotelli set Liverpool back £16 million in 2014. The previous season, it could be argued that Balotelli really dug his feet in and worked hard with AC Milan, where he would score 18 goals in 41 appearances. Looking back in 2016, Balotelli reportedly claimed how he did not like the club and how it was one of the worst decisions of his life. It is unfortunate to say that after 10 years from that statement, we still have to live with the fact that he joined Liverpool. So what makes Mario Balotelli's move to Liverpool so bad that it warrants, in my opinion, being a worse transfer than the likes of Jean-Kevin Augustin, Winston Bogarde, and Jack Rodwell? Well, it's really how the transfer derailed the project in real time on the pitch. Augustin was a catastrophic transfer financially, but did not affect the on-pitch performances of Leeds. Bogarde was expensive and symbolic, but Chelsea was still stable and won trophies in that era. Rodwell was emblematic of Sunderland's decline, but Sunderland were already structurally failing after surviving by the skin of their teeth. Liverpool had just finished the 2014 season second, scoring 101 goals. As Luis Suarez was moving to Barcelona, Liverpool tried to consolidate themselves as a top 4 Champions League club. Balotelli, a high-profile attacking solution and previous Premier League winner, could have been the answer alongside Ricky Lambert and Fabio Borini. However, out of 16 Premier League appearances, he only scored 1 goal. The whole Liverpool attack collapsed and Liverpool fell to 6th. Bad transfers come in different shapes and sizes, and in this case, it was not necessarily a financial failure, but instead a sporting failure. Paying a reasonable fee for a striker who had scored 30 goals in 54 appearances in 1.5 years, only for him to then become the central piece in a season that collapsed at the top level. And what came of this 10 years since? Being criticised by his manager for swapping shirts, never clicking with both Rodgers up to his sacking and being told to find a new club under Jurgen Klopp. He then joined Nice on a free, finding some of the best football of his career, finding the net 18 times in his best season in the 2017-18 season. That is why on one hand, it is a great shame it never worked out with Liverpool, because he really had the talent to become one of the best in the world. But a chronic lack of discipline, poor work ethic, and immaturity will only take you so far in the world of football. Number 9, Antony for Manchester United in 2022. The Brazilian GOAT. The master of dazzling flair, quick feet, sharp dribbling, signature spins, which would put your fidget spinner to shame. He is the 9th worst Premier League signing in history. It's time to get serious now. From 2020 to 2022, Antony was an incredibly beneficial presence in an Ajax side who won the Eredivisie twice and won the KNVB Cup in 2021. He scored and assisted with ease in a side managed by Erik ten Hag. However, in 2022, Ten Hag joined Manchester United, replacing Ralf Rangnick, who was one of 3 managers at Old Trafford that season. Man United had a manager who won numerous accolades in the Netherlands and nearly guided Ajax to a Champions League final, and he was about to bring to Old Trafford some familiar faces. Antony was one of 2 members of the Ajax team who would make the switch to England, where Antony was signed for a gargantuan £87 million. This made Antony not only the 3rd highest transfer fee paid by Man United, behind Lukaku and Pogba, but also the highest fee ever recorded in the Eredivisie. So, how did Antony do? Well, funnily enough, we'll start positively. He was the first United player to score in his first 3 consecutive Premier League games. A great feat, and unfortunately, this is the peak of his United career. In 96 appearances for United in 2.5 years, he would score only 12 goals and assist 5 times. His highest scoring season for United was 8, which is only 1 more than James Milner scored for Liverpool in the 2018-19 season, and he was on a free. Once Ten Hag was sacked in October 2024 and Ruben Amorim would take charge in Manchester, not only did Antony's playtime drastically drop, but he would also be part of what was known as the Bomb Squad, a group of exiles who were deemed not in Amorim's Man United plans and being looked at to find football elsewhere. Initially on a loan midway through the 2024-25 season, Antony would find his new home of football in Spain with Manuel Pellegrini's Real Betis, and funnily enough, would also find some great form back in his life. In the 2025-26 season, at the point of writing, Antony has already nearly reached his total goal tally with Betis, in comparison to the 2.5 seasons with United. With regular football, Antony has returned to somewhat great form, which he found in the Netherlands. He has returned to being a difference maker. However, his time in England will be remembered in a different light. For Manchester United, not only will he be remembered as a meme who people enjoy calling the GOAT, or adding his serious face onto anything for when he was coming on as a sub, or even laughed at when he does his trademark spin, but he will be remembered as one of the worst signings to grace England. Number 8, Massimo Taibbi's move to Man United in 1999. Now this inclusion was the most difficult, because I was trying to choose between Taibbi and João Felix, so rest assured whichever one is in this position, the other one will be my number 1 honourable mention, and I'll do my best to explain why they're not in my top 50. Anyway, Massimo Taibbi, Man United's most famous flop. Historically, Man United have had more issues with their choice of goalkeepers than solutions since Peter Schmeichel left in 1999. From Andre Onana to Mark Bosnich, Tim Howard to Altay Bayındır. However, there is one goalkeeper that really does take the cake after all these years. Regrettably, I'll be the first to say that Onana has an incredibly strong case of being the worst goalkeeper in Man United's history. But we have a bit more time to answer that question. After all these years, Massimo Taibi still takes the cake, and if you're born after 2000, let me do my best to explain why. An injury to current goalkeeper Mark Bosnich was the reason behind the current European champions purchasing an additional goalkeeper. Already having Raymond van der Houw and Nick Colkin in their ranks, Ferguson looked to Europe to find another one between the sticks. Stretching as far as Italy, Man United sought Venezia keeper Massimo Taibi, who had previously played nearly every game in Serie A, and for £4.5 million, he would join the Red Devils just before the 1999 transfer window closed. Cutting to the chase, he would play 4 games for Man United and would return to Italy 4 months later. So, where did it all go wrong? Well, on his debut against Liverpool, he would lose his positioning sense as he tries to fling an arm to stop the ball, but would instead meet Sami Hyypiä's head and put the ball in the net. Nothing much to do for Liverpool's second, but United won 2-3. No harm done, and he would even pull off some good saves in the match, being awarded the Man of the Match award. Next would be against Wimbledon, which would end up as a 1-1 draw. It is what it is. Now for the third game, and evidently the game Taibi is remembered for all the wrong reasons. A shot from Matt Letizia outside the box, which was so slow that if you blinked, you would still see the shot meet Massimo Taibi, would slip through his legs into the goal. The blind Venetian was the name bestowed upon him by the English press. And lastly, the final one of his 4 games with Man United, Chelsea. He first stampeded out of his 6-yard box to punch the ball out, only to find Gus Poyet placing the ball in the net. A looping header over Taibi from Chris Sutton, patting the ball in front of him from Gus Poyet to slot in afterwards, watching Henning Berg put the ball in the net in Andre Onana style, and Jody Morris smashing the ball between Taibi's legs would allow Chelsea to thumb Man United 5-0 at Stamford Bridge. And that is all she wrote about Taibi's time at Man United. He would move to Regina on loan for the rest of the season, and Man United would charge for another Premier League title, with Van der Houw being selected as United's number 1 and playing enough matches to claim a Premier League medal. There are a lot of goalkeepers for Man United who could have strong cases for being their worst ever goalkeeper. Andre Onana sabotaging United's Champions League hopes in recent history, Mark Bosnich only having a 39% clean sheet percentage behind arguably the strongest defences in the league, even Fabian Barthez for his unnecessary eccentricity at times. But let's not forget, even if you never watched him, how it only took 4 games for one of the greatest managers in the sport to know when a player isn't going to cut it. For a goalkeeper who had played in the Milan derbies to providing some footage which would be fitting for a "don't do this if you're a goalkeeper" video, Massimo Taibi, 27 years later, still rules supreme. Number 7, Angel Di Maria to Man United in 2014. With a couple of South American superstars joining Man United from this list, such as Kleberson, Juan Veron and Alexis Sanchez, we turn our attention to the Argentine winger. This is in no way about his quality. Angel Di Maria is easily one of the greatest wingers in modern history. So why is he 7th? Signed in August 2014 for £59.7 million, a British record transfer at the time, he was to stay in Manchester for 5 years, earning 200 grand a week. He was going to wear the number 7 shirt, like Eric Cantona, David Beckham, and Cristiano Ronaldo. As he was only about 26 at the time, he was going to be the future for Man United, a marquee signing to show the world what they're missing and to watch out for Manchester United. He lasted 1 year, playing 27 times, scoring 3 goals and assisting 10. As already mentioned, this is nothing to do with quality. Under Louis van Gaal, he was played out of position. restricted from showing his strengths on the pitch, and would be shown passing stats rather than encouraging him to be in the right place at the right time to score or assist for his team. A near enough £60 million signing, who scored 4 and assisted 18 goals for Real Madrid the previous season, shouldn't really be pushed to complete more backward passes. This was a time when Man United had not long ago waved goodbye to Sir Alex Ferguson, who loved traditional wingers who challenged defenders near the penalty box, like Ryan Giggs. There were also some things off the pitch which affected Di Maria's time in England, such as the attempted burglary at his house at the start of 2015 and his wife begging him to not move to England prior to his signing at Old Trafford. It was settled before he could settle in England for more than a year. He angled his way to move away from England in the summer, moving to PSG for a cut price of £44 million. Now there would be hate and animosity between the player and the club, more so from the player, as he would talk about how he couldn't care less about Man United, to put it delicately, labelling the number 7 shirt as Man United as just a shirt. According to PSG teammate Marcin Bolka, at the time, Di Maria actively hated Man United. A lot of these players on this list, one way or another, are here for their talent and overpriced transfers. But there have been a couple of examples where the managers have had a direct impact on a player's time in the Premier League, and Louis van Gaal's handling of Angel Di Maria is the poster boy for such a reason. Di Maria is even quoted as saying that it was because of Van Gaal that he had a horrible time in Manchester. Whether you believe Van Gaal placed him in all the attacking positions and was not convinced that Di Maria could hack the English top flight or not, since leaving Man United, he would go on to score and assist his way to winning trophies in France, Portugal, and with the Argentina national team. Angel Di Maria is the 7th worst Premier League signing of all time, because Louis van Gaal made him one of the worst Premier League signings of all time. Number 6, Adrian Mutu to Chelsea in 2003. To begin the Roman Abramovich era in Chelsea, big signings were made to ensure Chelsea competed amongst the best in the world. The likes of Damien Duff to Blackburn, Veron as already mentioned for Man United, Hernan Crespo for Inter Milan, Claude Makelele from Real Madrid, and Scott Parker from Charlton were all acquired for £10 million or more. In addition to this list was another signing from the Italian League, where Adrian Mutu joined from Parma for £15.8 million. Having already asserted himself as an international regular with Romania and previously scoring 18 goals in 31 league games in Serie A, this was definitely a big step which should have shot Mutu into international stardom. Should have, but we'll get to that. With skills and qualities that compared him to a snake, quoted by Claudio Ranieri, going on to say, quote, "Mutu is so clever, so cunning, and stays hidden until it is necessary to apply the killer finish." Mutu was on top of Ranieri's desired list for Abramovich, and wanted to suit him with champions and strong characters. So, with 4 goals in his first 3 games in the colour blue, it was initially so obvious how this guy was acclaimed for being nominated for the Ballon d'Or. However, even without knowing Adrian Mutu, the fact this footballer is on a list like this should tell you how down south this transfer came to fruition after all these years. It wasn't a lack of quality which puts him here amongst his counterparts already mentioned, or injuries plaguing his time in England, but instead a capitulation of his career by his own hands. Once Chelsea's special one arrived in 2004, he caught wind of Mutu's need to join in parties, and Mourinho's mind was set on Mutu not being a part of his plans, finding his place on the bench after numerous bust-ups over reasons we are about to look into now. It was in September of that year that a 7-month ban was imposed on Mutu for returning from a drugs test which came back positive for cocaine. 2 games into the 2004-05 season, he was released from the club and would return to Italy in January 2005, but would not be able to play until May of that year. It would be with Fiorentina that he would return to top goal-scoring form. But the damage has already been done to his career, from an outsider's perspective, as someone who took substances that would ensure he would be banned after a Coppa Italia match against Lazio. Adrian Mutu is a great example of a footballer
who football fans will only remember by focusing on the bad side of the profession. But let's not forget, out of 528 competitive games in his career, he scored over 200 goals. He was an elite goal scorer who anyone would want in their team. However, it is by his own hands that he not only suffered the consequences of his own decisions and life choices, but also that he is placed 6th in this list. Number 5, Bebe to Manchester United in 2010. It is weird to say this, but I still remember Bebe's debut when he came off the bench for Chi-Sung Park in a cup match, not having one iota of knowledge of who this guy was. All we knew at the time was that he was an attacker from Portugal. 16 years later, we've come to terms that he is one of the worst signings ever. I promise you, I don't have anything against Man United. Recommended to Ferguson by assistant Carlos Queiroz, Man United paid £7.4 million for someone who's reportedly being pursued by both Real Madrid and Benfica. Immediately, alarm bells set off over the transfer, as Portuguese authorities investigated the deal on grounds of corruption. All over a player Ferguson admitted he had never seen play. This faith in someone who was a recommendation by word of mouth rather than a whole scouting process was surely someone worthwhile. Contracted to Manchester United for 4 years, led to 3 of those years out on loan to Besiktas, Rio Ave and Pacos de Ferreira. And in the 1 season he was with the first team, he made 2 Premier League appearances and scored no goals. He did score 2 goals though, one in the League Cup against Wolves and another goal in the Champions League against Bursaspor. This may not be a worse signing in terms of it being financially crippling or culturally damaging to the club. However, Bebe's signing was so bad that it was clear as day that he was not at the required level. Coming from Portugal's 3rd tier weeks prior, being loaned repeatedly and sold at a loss, Bebe lived the dream that so many of us can only imagine, which is not only becoming a professional footballer, more so after his upbringing, but also representing one of the biggest football clubs in England, let alone the world. Plenty of players flop, plenty overpriced, plenty struggle with injuries. But Bebe's transfer is a bit more different because it represents the breakdown in elite recruitment standards. That makes this transfer not necessarily unsuccessful, but more so embarrassing. Number 4, Nicolas Pepe to Arsenal in 2019. For £72 million, Arsenal made Pepe their club record signing from Lille, where the Ivory Coast international was scoring for fun in Ligue 1. Having just turned 24 years old, Nicolas Pepe arrived in England as a winger who had so much potential to set the world alight, but already had a few people surprised over the fact Arsenal paid that much to begin with. Under Unai Emery, Pepe made his debut against Newcastle in August, coming off the bench, and would find his first start 2 weeks later. He would end the season with only 5 goals from 31 games, and with a new manager, Mikel Arteta, he would still be using the young winger. Obviously, Pepe required a lot of time to adapt to English football, which didn't help with the new manager, as a new playing style was embedded halfway through the season. In summary, Arsenal's record signing shone in moments, scoring a goal once in a while, a smart piece of skill here and there, but was inconsistent. The next season, fewer games, but he found his scoring boost as he would score 10 goals in 29 league games. This was all for naught though, as Arsenal would finish 8th in the 2020-21 season. And we all know about Arsenal during the COVID years. It would be the season after that Pepe would find himself surplus to requirements, hardly finding any playtime now that Arsenal would make signings that are still within the squad today. As a result, he would be shipped out on loan to Nice and later find a move to Turkey with Trabzonspor. The fee? Nothing. After making Nicolas Pepe a £72 million signing, he would leave Arsenal 4 years later for nothing. Ultimately, it did not work out for player or club. Pepe had good moments when he attacked, but he didn't work hard enough defensively. He would soon enough be replaced in the first team with the upcoming Bukayo Saka. From learning amongst the likes of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and Alexander Lacazette, he couldn't displace them in the first team and would ultimately join them in finding first team football away from England. At least for a while in Aubameyang's case. Now with Villarreal, he hasn't scored more than 6 goals since leaving Arsenal in 2023. The main question looming over Pepe's Arsenal career is this. What if Arsenal listened to Unai Emery and brought in Wilfried Zaha instead of Nicolas Pepe? Having just scored 10 goals for Crystal Palace in the 2018-19 season, Zaha wouldn't have needed as much time to adjust to football in England and could have been a difference maker for Arsenal, unlike Eberechi Eze in some way now. On paper, the amazing last year Pepe had with Lille was perceived as someone on their way to global stardom. But instead he would find himself under 2 managers whose style didn't meet Pepe's strengths. As much as Pepe deserved a big move after setting Ligue 1 alight, he was dealt a bad hand at Arsenal. As a player, in their development would be prioritised over their record signing. That should tell you that Pepe joining Arsenal was really over before it began. And with no sell-on value, this is one of the worst ever. So before we go over our last 3, let's now quickly go over some honourable mentions, as I feel it's important to cover some players who could definitely be fitting for a top 50 worst signing list. However, because there have been so many bad signings over 35 years, I'm going to try and fit only 10 footballers into this section, otherwise we'll be here forever. Firstly, someone who I'm sad just hasn't worked out for the club I support. Fabio Carvalho's move to Brentford has just not worked at all. Signed from Liverpool for £27.5 million, 33 appearances and 6 goals in 2 years doesn't match the price, and that's taking into consideration his ACL injury this season. I do hope he gets better soon, as he is a real talent, but he can't dislodge Damsgaard, Schade or Utara from the first team. Wasn't worth it. Gylfi Sigurdsson for Everton is another bad one for £50 million. A great addition for Swansea in the mid-2010s, but once his contract expired in 2022, he's another figure not worth even half of what Everton paid for. There was something else involving him during this time, but we don't need to get into that. How about an honourable mention for a player who didn't want to join Newcastle, but did for a record fee of £16.8 million, and would become incredibly disliked for refusing to play for Newcastle in 2009, which led to them being relegated, while his management team sent out a brochure to clubs to sign him. Yeah, Michael Owen makes the list.
You just made the list!
Sticking with Newcastle, how about Albert Luque, who signed for them in 2005 for £9 million and played only 21 times in 2 years. And we can't forget another goalkeeper who represents the downfall of modern goalkeeping, Claudio Bravo and his move to Man City as Pep Guardiola's first experimental ball-playing goalkeeper in England. Boasting one of the worst save percentages in the league in 2016-17, he was someone who was replaced and phased out almost as quickly as he arrived in Manchester. And I know I mentioned this guy briefly, but since so many of you voted for him in my poll, I agree that Joe Cole's move to Liverpool is worth a mention. He got sent off on his debut against Arsenal. He was only an own goal away from being as much of a disaster for Liverpool as Jonathan Woodgate was for Real Madrid. For my next inclusion, surprisingly to me, Kevin Davies' move to Blackburn in 1998 was shocking, as he would cost Blackburn £7.5 million, only to score 2 goals in 29 appearances, before being sent back to Southampton in an exchange deal. Another signing I felt was underwhelming and sad was Saido Berahino's move to Stoke in 2017 for £15 million. What was once a striker tipped to play for Tottenham and named in the England squad in 2014 would soon see his career go into a constant downfall, now playing in Slovenia. Word of advice on his inclusion: don't get in a hump with your manager when a move doesn't work out. And lastly, the one player I'd say could be fitting anywhere on this list, but for whatever reason in hindsight, I couldn't place in a specific spot. João Felix, when he moved to Chelsea in 2024. Initially on loan at Stamford Bridge, he was sent off on his debut. He scored a few goals during that loan spell afterwards, but then manager Mauricio Pochettino didn't want to sign him permanently. Once he left, Todd Boehly took out the checkbook and signed him for roughly £47 million. 12 league games and 1 goal later, he would move on to Saudi Arabia for £26 million. An utter waste of time for Chelsea fans to invest their hopes in. So, those are my 10 honourable mentions. Players I felt could easily be placed somewhere in this list, but didn't make the final cut and still very much deserve a place on this video. So with that done and dusted, let's close this video with, in my opinion, the 3 worst Premier League signings of all time. Number 3, Romelu Lukaku to Chelsea in 2021. Signed from Inter Milan for £97.5 million, Romelu Lukaku was given the privilege of becoming Chelsea's most expensive signing ever at the time. Having just won the Serie A title, he was viewed as the missing piece in a Champions League winning squad. Under Thomas Tuchel, Chelsea beat Man City to lift their second ever Champions League trophy in Porto the previous season, and alongside forwards like Christian Pulisic, Hakim Ziyech, and our 44th entrant Timo Werner, Chelsea aimed for greater heights with Romelu Lukaku in their ranks. Surpassing Neymar as the most expensive player in cumulative transfer fees, accumulating moves totaling almost £300 million, Lukaku had already been a proven goalscorer. At Man United, Inter Milan and Anderlecht, and even during his loan spell at West Brom, he had shown that ability. I still remember young Lukaku flourishing at West Brom in a team where he was relied upon, scoring 17 goals in 35 appearances. 9 years later, he became Chelsea's most expensive signing at the time. Returning to the club, he had originally left in 2014 to prove his worth in blue. The expectation on his shoulders, 30 plus goals in all competitions, and becoming the answer to Chelsea's long-term number 9 problem. Obviously, when a player arrives at that kind of price tag, anything less than elite output looks like failure. So, to answer why Lukaku is third on my list, firstly, his Premier League return was underwhelming. 8 Premier League goals in 26 games throughout the 2021-22 season. There were obvious tactical issues with Chelsea's pressing and possession style, which in turn left Lukaku struggling to fit consistently in Thomas Tuchel's system. Moving forward in time, in December 2021, Lukaku gave an interview with Italian media, stating how he was unhappy with Chelsea's system, praising his previous club publicly and admitting he wanted to return to Inter Milan. Happening only months after signing, he created a major dressing room and PR crisis, where he was temporarily dropped from the squad as a result. After just 1 season back in London, he returned on loan to Inter in 2022, where Chelsea received a loan fee, but still paid part of his wages, making it incredibly difficult to permanently move him on. Essentially, Chelsea spent nearly £100 million on a player who lasted 1 turbulent season. With all these points in mind, Lukaku's transfer back to Chelsea is worthy of being in the top 10 of this kind of list. So why number 3? Well, personally, Lukaku's transfer to Chelsea symbolised something even worse for the club: their striker curse. The transfer reinforced Chelsea's long-running striker issues. It was expensive disappointment after expensive disappointment, with the likes of Fernando Torres, Alvaro Morata, and Timo Werner being clear examples. Lukaku was meant to be the supposed solution, but instead, his failure felt even bigger. Lukaku wasn't a bad player. For every open goal missed or heavy first touch in his career, he has scored plenty more goals. However, a £97.5 million striker, who publicly wanted to leave within months and was loaned out after 1 season, inevitably becomes labelled a disastrous signing. Number 2, Ali Dia to Southampton in 1996. Funnily enough, if you go onto his Wikipedia page, it will show he played 30 times, scoring 5 goals across a 10-year football career. Technically described as a former professional footballer, the case of Ali Dia at Southampton is often labelled as the most bizarre signing in Premier League history, and contextually can be deemed as one of the worst signings ever. However, it is important to clarify one thing about this signing. Southampton were literally tricked into signing him. Essentially, Southampton signed a player purely because of a fake phone call, with the caller claiming that he was a world-class footballer. That being George Weah. The manager at the time, Graham Souness, received a phone call from someone impersonating George Weah, the player who had recently won the Ballon d'Or. The impersonator claimed Ali Dia was Weah's cousin, going on to say that not only did Dia play for PSG, but also had international experience with Senegal. Obviously, none of this was true, considering that Dia was playing for Blythe Spartans at the time. With only two forwards, that being Matt Le Tissier and Egil Ostenstad, Southampton clearly had a striker issue, and either through naivety or desperation, Dia signed a 1-month deal at the Dell, worth thousands of pounds. So after one training session and one postponed reserve game, Dia found himself on the bench for Southampton's Premier League game against Leeds in November 1996. In front of 15,000 fans, lay witness to Ali Dia, the man who did not play for PSG or the Senegal national team, but had instead represented teams in Finland, the second Bundesliga, and the fourth tier of French football. As Matt Le Tissier picked up an injury in the first half, Dia came on as a substitute after 32 minutes. His performance looked so out of place that he was substituted off after 53 minutes, and he would be released 2 weeks later. In an age with very limited scouting, false identity claims, and blind trust, Ali Dia wasn't just a bad signing, and for me one of the worst, it was more like a successful football prank.
This guy turned up, a guy called Ali Dia, turned up on the recommendation that he was from George Weah, apparently. To be honest, it didn't look very good. And we thought, well, that's fair enough. People, trialists come and go, and I just thought this was going to be the same thing. This guy will never see him again. He wasn't particularly good. We turn up for the game the next day. We're playing against Leeds. He's on the subs bench. He's named on the bench. And that's like, well, that's a bit strange. Didn't look that good yesterday. Well, after about 20 minutes, I get a calf strain. And it's actually me that comes off. It was unbelievable. He ran around the pitch like Bambi on ice. It was very, very embarrassing to watch. And just after half-time, Graham Souness actually had to take him off again because he was that bad. He was just chuffed to have got out on the pitch and played. I think it was a great wind-up from someone who just came up with this idea. And if it had turned up when you'd been framed, I would have been, I wouldn't have been surprised. It was crazy. Sunday morning he turns up, he has a bit of treatment, he leaves, and then we never see him again. He never came back. It was very odd, and not quite sure how a man of Graham's experience fell for that.
So, 49 down, 1 to go. Who could simply be acclaimed as the Premier League's worst ever signing, even beating a guy who would later play for Gateshead after pranking Southampton and somehow earning a Premier League appearance? Number 1, Mykhailo Mudryk to Chelsea in 2023. A signing made not even 3 years ago, in my opinion, is the solitary cherry on the cake for the worst Premier League signing to ever exist. For the top spot, it has to be Mudryk, and I want to try and make that argument. After all, so many signings already mentioned, maybe even some in the honourable mentions, have their own case of being number 1, so I will do my best. Mudryk's signing to Chelsea in 2023 can be summarised in 3 words as to why it is a complete flop. Price, output, expectations. Initially linked with Arsenal, Todd Boehly one day turned on the TV, looked at Sky Sports News, saw the letters on the screen and said to himself, I want that. So for £89 million, he got what he wanted. A 22-year-old Ukrainian international from Shakhtar Donetsk. This was the largest transfer fee received not only for Shakhtar, but also in Ukrainian Premier League history, and made Mudryk the most expensive Ukrainian footballer ever. Before Chelsea's incessant need to throw money at the wall and see what sticks, the price tag set elite expectations of an immediate impact. All this for a footballer who had not even made 50 senior league appearances in Ukraine, had only recently returned from developing with lower league sides on loan, and whose reputation was built largely on half a Champions League campaign and a strong start to the 2022-23 season. Like so many signings on this list, and something I've covered in a previous Theorem video, Chelsea paid a superstar price for the promise of a player. The competition between Chelsea and Arsenal forced the former to overpay dramatically in order to secure the deal quickly. The result was a transfer where the financial risk was far higher than the player's justified proven pedigree. As previously mentioned, for a winger purchased for close to £100 million, the expectation is consistent attacking production, goals, assists, chance creation, and match-winning moments. Instead, what Chelsea got was a player who struggled in the Premier League, who had long goal droughts across his early seasons, who had limited assists despite playing attacking positions, and who was frequently substituted or benched due to inconsistency. Both statistically and visually, his performances often lacked that final third composure and decision-making expected at that price point. In terms of pace and dribbling, he definitely had them, but they rarely translated into end product. That was the main issue initially. Quiet performances were judged against a near £100 million investment. Watching Modric's highlight reels online and his Champions League appearances for Shakhtar, you could understand the enormous hype based on talent alone. Explosive acceleration, direct dribbling, and fearless attacking play were all on display even against Real Madrid. It was with these moments in his early career that Chelsea developed the impression that this would be their future elite winger, or that they simply didn't want Arsenal to have it. From early comparisons to Kylian Mbappe, to raw and inconsistent performances in the Premier League rather than being transformative. What made this transfer look even worse was the contrast between highlight-driven expectations and reality. The final nail in the coffin for a young up-and-coming talent like Modric was being provisionally suspended in December 2024 after testing positive for meldonium, a performance-enhancing substance. Initially suspended from football pending investigation, in June 2025, the FA formally charged him with anti-doping rule violations, meaning he could face a ban of up to 4 years if found guilty. Since his last appearance for Chelsea was the 20th of November in 2024, it is easy to say that Modric was really meant to be the chosen one.
You were the chosen one!
Modric was meant to be the upcoming superstar, having already represented the Ukrainian national team nearly 30 times and shining in cup competitions for Shakhtar. But in the end, Modric became a victim of his own hype circle. Chelsea didn't buy Modric hoping he might become a star. They bought him believing he already was one. Nearly £100 million later, the goals never came, the impact never arrived, and eventually even the player himself disappeared from the pitch entirely. When a transfer combines a record fee, enormous hype, minimal production, and a suspension that halts a career in its tracks, it stops being just a disappointing signing. It becomes the worst Premier League signing of all time. So thank you very much if you've made it this far. What was predicted to take a month of writing, researching, voicing, and editing this video turned out to take more than a quarter of a year. But hopefully it'll be worth it. Let me know what you think, who you'd add, who'd you take out, and any other kinds of big list videos you'd like to see in the future. Like, comment, subscribe, and as always, I will see you soon.